Here's a segment from this month's edition of St. Charles Parish Today, a new monthly local talk show.
It's a tenuous process that all elected bodies have to go through every 10 years, redistricting. With brand new census numbers provided by the federal government, Congress and state legislatures must decide how population shifts will change the way their organizations represent American citizens. The St. Charles Parish Council, as an elected body, is required to complete a redistricting plan this year as well. But redrawing council districts isn't as easy as it may seem, with a multitude of legal precedents and guidelines informing every decision. I'd like to welcome South Central Planning and Development CEO Kevin Belanger to the show to talk about this important issue. Thank you so much for being on the show today. Probably the most important question about redistricting was, why is it so important?
Well, back when our country was formed, our congressional leaders created this to be able to assure that every citizen was represented fairly and equitably. And that is why we reapportion ourselves every 10 years after the decennial census.
Okay, so that's a good question too, is what's the difference between reapportionment and redistricting, and how do those two concepts work together?
Well, they pretty much are both interchangeable, except there's a slight varying difference. Redistricting is actually redrawing the boundaries by which representatives are representing a particular constituency. However, reapportionment, in the case of Louisiana this year, having lost one congressional seat, it has to now reassess itself and redraw itself with the loss of one political boundary, the congressional seat. Mm-hmm. So we have to reapportion across the country and redistrict within each of the governing authorities' areas.
Right, okay. So what are some of the legal considerations someone like you would look at as you're drawing new districts, especially as with the council districts?
That's a really good question. We basically have 4 criteria that we try to follow. First is the one man, one vote rule, which is meaning taking the ideal population, taking the representation and dividing it by the population, or the population by the representation. I.e. in St. Charles Parish, there's roughly 7,540 persons per particular district. That would be the ideal. The question is, how do we make that happen that is going to afford minorities the opportunity to be reelected or elected in a respectable district? And also we try to keep like communities together. Mm-hmm. And lastly, we try never to try to pit existing elected officials against each other, because the process of reapportionment or redistricting is not to take someone out of their representative area.
Mm-hmm. And that's very important, because you have constituencies that are used to, the official that represents them, and they've come to know that. So if it changes, that's a kind of a problem.
That is correct.
So what are the major changes? The council actually approved a redistricting plan to submit to the Department of Justice. What are some of the major changes there?
St. Charles is a very unique parish as compared to many of our other parishes. The river definitely severs the parish in two. Basically, there are equal populations on either side of the river. However, what we have seen over the last 10 years is an increase in population on the east bank with a decrease in population on the west. However, the parish's population is basically around even. The east bank is around 49% and the west bank is about 51%. The uniqueness of the plans that we provided were, we tried to give as little amount of tweaking to the existing districts as possible, not to really create a whole new realm of council districts and pitting existing councilmen against each other. On the East Bank, we have Ms. Wendy Benedetto, who had to lose approximately 544 people, and Mr. Larry Cochran, I believe, had to lose somewhere around 900 people. So they had to give some of their population. On the opposite side, the West Bank, Mr. Shelley Tastet had to gain approximately 900 people, and also Mr. Paul Hogan had to gain approximately 777 people. So when you add the two together, the East Bank had to lose basically 1,500 people, and the West Bank had to gain approximately 1,500 people. So the shifting had to occur. And obviously, the 3 alternative plans that we provided, alternate 1 was the one ultimately selected and then tweaked a little bit, and we called it alternate 1A, which the council ultimately approved.
Okay, and I think there were changes in 2 districts, the kind of the major changes.
Well, every particular district shifted
Okay.
in the parish. The only one that really hadn't shifted a whole lot was District 1, which happens to be the minority district. We always try to preserve that particular district first, then work around in creating the other represented districts.
Okay. So what has to happen before this plan can ultimately be approved?
Well, the council has approved it locally. We have created legal descriptions for the voting districts and also the voting precincts. Now, simultaneously, while submitting this to the Department of Justice, which we hope to get the submission out by I guess the first week in May, we will also hand this over to the Louisiana legislature for them, the House and the Senate, to be able to concur with the alignments of the voting precincts and districts. We're hopeful that we'll have this in. We have no doubt that we'll have it in by May the 20th, which is the last date that we're able to get pre-clearance prior to the next elections.
Okay, and I want to note as well that if anybody wants to go ahead and see the redistricting plans, we have that on our website at stcharlesparish-la.gov. Is there anything else you'd like to add about this?
Well, I mean, you know, St. Charles Parish is always a really good council to work with, and in fact, I'm blessed in the region that we serve, that we have a really good cast of council people that we work with, and although it's a very arduous and very volatile process, it was a very civil, very open process that we provided and the council allowed to take place, and ultimately we were very happy with the plans and the opportunity to be able to work with the parish council.
Okay, well, thank you very much for coming on the show and
You're
talking
welcome.
about this important issue.
Thank you.
Catch the entire episode right here on Channel 6, daily at 5 p.m., or watch anytime at scptoday.com.